There is a generation walking the earth right now, and most of you don't realize how rare you are. You were raised before the world learned how to keep people sedated with endless noise. Before answers arrived in seconds. Before attention became a marketplace. Before everyone turned their life into a performance. You learned something modern people are losing fast. You learned how to wait, how to endure silence, how to carry questions longer than comfort allows, how to get up even when nobody clapped. And because of that, you've often felt out of place in this era. You sit in conversations that feel shallow, and your spirit quietly checks out. You watch people crumble over things you learned to survive at 10 years old. You see promises treated like suggestions, loyalty treated like weakness, marriage treated like a temporary feeling. And something in you aches, not because you hate people, but because you can feel the world becoming fragile. Sometimes you wonder why life felt heavier for you than for others. Why responsibility sat on your shoulders early. Why resilience feels natural, but rest feels foreign. Let me speak to you with gentleness in truth. That wasn't bad luck. That wasn't you being too intense. That wasn't you being born in the wrong time. What if God was shaping something in you before the world learned how to distract itself? What if the simplicity, the lack of excess, the emotional restraint, the pressure to figure it out, was not neglect, but formation? Not because you're better than others, but because God forged you differently. And today, I want to uncover the rare traits God planted in those who grew up in the 1970s. Traits this generation desperately needs, even if it doesn't yet know how to recognize them. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may finally explain why your life unfolded the way it did. Why the 70s matter. Foundation. The 1970s weren't glamorous years. They were years of tension and transition. Families adapted, cultures shifted, values got tested, not always by mockery, but by neglect. You didn't grow up with constant emotional validation. You grew up with observation, correction, and consequence. And while the world calls that outdated, God calls it formative. Scripture tells us God works through seasons. Ecclesiastes says there is a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to build and a time to rebuild. You were planted in a season where strength was built quietly, where character formed before identity became a performance, where pain wasn't posted, it was processed. And that environment cultivated something rare: internal depth. Many people today know how to express emotions, but few know how to carry weight. You learned to carry weight. You learned how to stay responsible while uncomfortable. You learned how to endure without needing a spotlight. And here is the pattern. God prepares His most dependable servants in obscurity. Joseph was trained in a pit and a prison before a palace. Moses was shaped in a wilderness before leadership. David learned worship in fields before he learned war. If you've ever felt like your life demanded maturity too early, if you felt like joy was earned instead of handed, hear this. That wasn't abandonment. That was preparation. Chapter 1. The Weight-Bearers, Nehemiah's DNA. There is a kind of strength heaven honors that modern culture barely recognizes. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't announce itself. It simply endures. And one of the clearest portraits of that kind of strength is found in Nehemiah. Nehemiah wasn't raised as a prophet on a stage. He wasn't born into applause. He served in a hidden role, cupbearer to a foreign king. That job required what your generation understands instinctively: reliability, emotional restraint, constant vigilance, consistency under pressure. Every day he tasted the king's wine first, knowing betrayal could cost him his life. It wasn't glamorous. It was repetitive, invisible, uncelebrated. But it trained something in him: responsibility under pressure. That's what your childhood trained in you. You weren't raised to chase fulfillment. You were raised to fulfill obligation. You learned early that life doesn't pause because you feel heavy. Work still has to be done. Promises still have to be kept. Bills still show up. Family still needs you. And then Nehemiah hears the news. Jerusalem's walls are broken. God's people are exposed. Shame is sitting at the gates. And watch his response. He didn't make noise. He didn't start a campaign. He didn't posture. Scripture says he sat down and wept. He fasted. He prayed. Quietly. That detail matters. Because people raised like you were raised know how to process grief privately. You learned how to carry sorrow without demanding immediate resolution. You learned that pain doesn't always get explained, but it still must be faced. That ability to sit with burden instead of escaping it, that's rare now, and it's powerful. Then Nehemiah finally speaks to the king, not with drama, but with wisdom. Years of quiet discipline prepared him for a moment that would change history. And when permission is granted, Nehemiah does something that looks exactly like your generation. He assesses the damage in silence. He gathers people without type. He doesn't promise easy. He doesn't sell a fantasy. He says, essentially, we're in trouble, so let's rebuild. That's your language. You know what it means to rebuild. Many of you watched families fracture, communities shift, moral foundations erode. You adapted without manuals. You repaired what you could with the tools you had. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. And then opposition comes, fast. Mockery, threats, accusations, distractions. They try to lure Nehemiah off the wall. And he answers with one line that could define your entire life. I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. You learned how to stay focused while the world changed around you. You learned that not every voice deserves a response. That discernment, knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, is one of the rarest spiritual traits alive. Nehemiah's people built with one hand on their tools and the other ready. They didn't panic, but they didn't become careless. That's you. You aren't naive. You love deeply, carefully. You hope, but with realism. You trust God, but you understand life. And when exhaustion sets in, Nehemiah doesn't abandon mission. He reorganizes, strengthens the weary, reminds them who they are building for. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. That's the kind of faith your generation carries. Not trendy, not loud, but anchored. You don't need spectacle to believe. You've seen too much. And when the wall is finished, Scripture says the enemies lost confidence because they realized the work had been done with the help of God. Listen to me. The traits God formed in you were not only for survival. They were for rebuilding, for restoration, for this moment in history. The world doesn't need more opinions. It needs people who know how to stand, how to endure, how to rebuild without needing recognition. You carry that spirit. Chapter 2. Discernment in a noisy world. YOUR, rare filter. The world today is drowning in information and starving for wisdom. Everyone has a voice. Few have discernment. And one of the quiet gifts God planted in people raised in the 1970s is this. You can smell what's fake. You can feel when something is off. You can sense when a promise is a performance. Hebrews says mature people are those who have trained their senses to discern good and evil. Discernment is not a personality trait. It's not negativity. It's not cynicism. It's a trained spiritual muscle. And your life trained it, often the hard way. You didn't grow up with endless, safe spaces. You grew up with consequences. You learned to read rooms. You learned to watch patterns, not words. You learned to trust consistency over charisma. That's why you struggle in this era sometimes. Because modern culture rewards confidence, even if it's empty. But you were built to respect substance, even if it's quiet. So when you see the world rushing, reacting, rewriting morals every season, your spirit feels grief, not because you're bitter, but because you know what happens when foundations move. And God is not asking you to become loud to match the world. He is calling you to become a steady witness in the middle of it. A calm presence, a stable mind, a person who doesn't get hypnotized by trends. Because when storms come, people don't run to the loudest voice. They run to the most stable one. And that is why, even if you felt overlooked, heaven has not overlooked you. You were not trained for popularity. You were trained for pressure. You were not shaped for performance. You were shaped for responsibility. Soft transition. What you thought was just how you are. What you thought was just how you are is evidence of divine craftsmanship. And in the next chapters, we're going to uncover the rest of what God built in you. Reverence, loyalty, discipline, patience, calm under fire. And we're also going to talk about the part nobody mentions. The cost of always being the strong one. And how God invites you into rest without shame. We've already uncovered something the world rarely names but heaven recognizes instantly. You are a weight bearer. You were trained to rebuild, to endure without applause, to stay focused while the world tries to pull you off the wall. And now we move deeper, because there are more traits God planted in you that this generation needs like oxygen. Not flashy traits, not trendy traits, but rare traits. Traits that don't make you popular. They make you dependable. Chapter 3. Reverence, the lost language of holiness. One of the rarest traits left in modern society is reverence. Not fear like panic, not fear like insecurity, but fear is weight. The kind of weight that makes you careful with words, careful with promises, careful with what you touch, careful with what you call holy. Proverbs says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom," not the beginning of knowledge. Wisdom, because knowledge can be loud, but wisdom has gravity. And many of you, especially those shaped in the 1970s, carry that gravity naturally. You grew up in a time when words mattered more, when commitments weren't vibes, when a handshake meant something, when showing up wasn't optional. The world today can treat God like a concept, a motivational idea, a trend. But you were formed in a season where faith wasn't entertainment. It was necessity. You don't need a stage to worship. You don't need a fog machine to feel God. You don't need the room to be perfect to pray. Because reverence doesn't come from atmosphere. Reverence comes from history. You've watched God keep you. You've watched Him provide when you didn't know how you'd make it. You've watched Him strengthen you when nobody understood what you carried. So you don't approach Him casually. You approach Him like He's real. And that's why your faith, quiet as it may be, has authority. Let me say it plainly. In a generation that laughs at everything, reverence becomes revolutionary. Because reverence refuses to reduce God. It refuses to make Him small enough for the mind to manage. Some of you struggle in modern church spaces, not because you're judgmental, but because your spirit can tell when holy things are being handled lightly. Not everything is a joke. Not everything is content. Not everything should be casual. And God sees that in you. He sees the way you don't throw His name around. He sees the way you still respect what's sacred. He sees the way you still feel the weight of eternity. That isn't old-fashioned. That's wisdom. A moment to reflect. Ask yourself quietly, have I been carrying reverence, but calling it being different? Have I been protecting holy things, but feeling misunderstood for it? Have I been faithful in secret, while the world celebrates noise? If that's you, hear heaven. God is not asking you to become louder. He's asking you to stay holy. Because when the world collapses under confusion, reverent people become anchors. Chapter 4. Delayed gratification. The power to say no. There is another strength God forged in you that modern culture is losing fast. The ability to wait. The ability to deny yourself. The ability to say no without needing a therapist to validate it. The ability to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term obedience. Jesus said it clearly. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. That command requires something most people aren't trained for anymore. Self-control. And many of you learned it the hard way. You didn't grow up with instant everything. You waited for things. You worked before you rested. You learned that life doesn't owe you immediate comfort. And because of that, you've often felt lonely in this era. Because the world is addicted to relief. People don't want healing, they want escape. People don't want discipline, they want distraction. People don't want process, they want shortcuts. But you've been trained to endure process. And that's why the enemy has tried to shame you. He whispers, "Why are you so strict? Why are you so serious? Why can't you just enjoy life like everyone else?" But heaven calls your restraint strength. Galatians calls self-control a fruit of the Spirit. Not a personality type. A fruit. Meaning it's grown through seasons. Through pressure. Through choosing obedience when nobody is watching. Some of you have said no to things that would have made your life easier in the moment, but would have robbed your soul in the long run. You said no to certain friendships, no to certain shortcuts, no to certain pleasures that would have cost you your peace. And nobody clapped for that. But heaven recorded it. Because delayed gratification is not just discipline. It's spiritual authority. A picture to hold on to. Imagine two men. One lives by impulse. He follows feelings like a compass. He burns bright, then breaks. The other lives by conviction. He chooses the narrow road. He isn't loud, but he lasts. That second man is rare now. And if you've ever wondered why you can endure what breaks others, this is part of the answer. You were trained to carry a cross, not as punishment, as power. A moment to reflect. Where has God been training my no? What did I resist that saved my future? What temptation am I surviving right now that will become a testimony later? You may not feel strong, but the ability to obey without applause is one of the highest forms of strength. Chapter 5. Covenant Loyalty, the trait heaven trusts. There is a word your generation understands that modern culture has almost forgotten. Loyalty. Not loyalty to toxicity, not loyalty to abuse, but covenant loyalty, faithfulness that doesn't evaporate when life gets hard. And the Bible honors this kind of spirit again and again. Think of Ruth. Ruth lived in a world where leaving would have been logical. Naomi had lost her husband, lost her sons, lost her future. Everything in Ruth's situation screamed, start over, protect yourself, move on. But Ruth said something that still shakes history. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. That's not romance. That's covenant. That's a person who understands that love is not a mood. It's a decision. Many of you were built like Ruth. You stayed when it was uncomfortable. You held family together when nobody thanked you. You were the stable one in chaos. You kept showing up. And sometimes you felt used. Sometimes you felt invisible. Sometimes you felt like your life became a service to everyone else's needs. But here's the truth. Covenant loyalty is not weakness. It's the kind of weight-bearing character God built his foundations on. In a world that replaces people easily, your loyalty becomes a shelter. In a world that walks away at the first inconvenience, your consistency becomes healing. And this is why you've often been the one others lean on. Not because you're just strong, but because God put something in you that makes you safe. A moment to reflect. Have I been loyal, but secretly exhausted? Have I carried others, but never admitted I needed carrying too? Have I stayed faithful, but begun to wonder if God sees it? Let me answer that last question for you. He sees it. He sees every unseen sacrifice, every quiet act of love, every time you showed up when you wanted to disappear. And heaven never forgets covenant people. Transition, the cost of being the strong one. Now listen carefully, because this is where the message turns personal. Some of you have carried these traits so long that you've confused them with your identity. You don't just practice endurance. You became the one who endures. You don't just show loyalty. You became the one who holds everyone together. You don't just stay disciplined. You became the one who never needs anything. And over time, something happens. You start believing your value is only in what you can carry. But God is about to heal that. Because the same God who trained you to stand is also inviting you to rest. Not lazy rest. Not escape. Holy rest. Rest without shame. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He didn't say, "Come to me when you're finally strong." He said, "Come to me when you're tired." So if you've been the strong one for decades, if you've carried weight so long you don't know how to put it down, stay with me, because the next chapters are for the part of you that's still faithful, but quietly worn. Short prayer, smooth bridge into part 3. Lord, thank you for the unseen saints, for the steady ones, for the loyal ones, for the disciplined ones who kept walking even when nobody noticed. Heal what exhaustion has hidden. Restore what responsibility has drained. And teach your people that they are not only useful, they are loved. In Jesus' name, amen.